Hello and welcome to Eastern Marshlands, an evening with Comrades. Tonight we have with us Badman Massive.
Hey.
We have Dip Dap.
Yep.
As always, we have Pulsitus Pac-Man.
Nuke the whale, save the planet.
We also have with us QT Trep, who may or may not be back from grabbing something from outside. So we also have with us Space Linen.
Support Congress to Venezuela.
And I am TK Jones, and I'll be your host for this evening. And tonight we're talking about capitalizing on small successes, specifically a direct action taken by the National Union of Workers. Pac-Man, could you fill us in on that?
Okay, so basically what happened is my union, the National Union of Workers, of which I am a representative now officially, has taken direct action against Chemist warehouse business in Australia, a pharmaceutical company in Australia, for underpaying their workers via the industry standards. So basically everyone in the chemist industry, like, over-the-counter staff and back-of-house staff and all that sort of thing, like they were all getting paid 20% lower than the industry standard for the rest of the companies in Australia. So they will be chronically underpaid compared to the other companies in Australia. There was also a very, very rife case of sexual abuse amongst their male staff towards their female employees. And so basically there was a meeting called. And there was a general meeting of the staff called, and the union, the National Union of Workers, organised with the workforce and launched official protests. And eventually, there was no resolution to be reached, and so the National Union of Workers called a strike. Now, agreements were met in New South Wales and in South Australia. And in WA, so a strike was not necessary in these states. However, the Queensland and Victorian states did not compromise.
So action was taken in those states?
Correct. Yes. So Queensland and Victoria announced across all Chemist warehouse branches a general strike of their workers. So every branch of Chemist warehouse across Queensland and Victoria went on strike. Their demands was a 20% pay increase over 4 years, and the mandatory implication of, or inclusion rather, should I say, of training for all senior workforce members in sexual harassment and what is and isn't okay, and of course disciplinary action against numerous people found guilty of these actions, and of course the immediate end to casualization in employment. So what that means basically is, the casual employees would be put onto permanent part-time or full-time wages. Now, the strike lasted 16 days. In that time, employees' cars' tires were slashed. Pickup trucks, or dump trucks rather, so large amounts of fertilizer and cow manure, like fresh dung, was placed along the picket lines. Several NUW members were hospitalized after cars driven by counter-protesters, I suppose you could say. There's no proof, of course, quotation marks, actually slammed into members on the picket line.
Shit, I didn't hear about that.
Fuck.
Yeah, I didn't hear that either.
So basically the company's been resulting to terrorism.
Yes, essentially. However, after 16 days after the length of the strike, after these were made public, well, besides some of the heavier stuff, the company saw such a huge amount of brand damage and such a loss of profit, because one of the biggest actions was at the distribution centers, the workers actually prevented delivery trucks from delivering stock to the frontline stores.
I actually have a source on the inside, who shall remain nameless, who said that stock handlers in the stock room in the actual stores were getting reprimanded because there were gaps in the shelves, but of course there was no deliveries coming from further up the chain because of these strikes. But the bosses though didn't care, and they started reprimanding them for shit they couldn't have any control over.
Correct. And eventually they had to give way. And so in the end, they agreed to a 18.5% pay increase over 3 years, and the removal of all casual labourers, and as in conversion from their being casual to permanent part-time or full-time, depending on with all annual leave entitlements, sick pay, the works.
And this was all action taken by the NUW, and I think I saw a few IWW members there as well, wasn't there?
Correct, yes. The greatest bit that I loved about this, of the casual workers, union members got immediate conversion. Non-union members have to wait 6 months.
Oh.
So
yeah, that's actually good.
Join your union.
That's good, because so no tolerance for scabs in our union.
Jesus. So what was the media coverage of this? How did people hear about this?
Nothing. Almost complete blackout. Social media was the only place I saw it. There were only a very few cases of, like, it was mentioned like in 5 minutes of the nightly news. Like, wow. I didn't see much. Like, there was, like, no one talked about it. And it's not hard to see why.
So we have this positive union action, like a dual union action with the IWW as well, that has secured better pay, better conditions for workers, wage increase, decasualization, right? So this is like a little victory that we've achieved. And the main problem, it seems, of course, is it's basically just the media trying to, or from their own incompetence, just not reporting on it. So even though there's been like this media blackout, how can we draw on this example and use it to further the workers' cause, if you will, for lack of a better phrase?
Well, for one thing, Australia's media is very right-wing.
Yeah.
So
Rupert Murdoch.
Our mate Rupert, yeah.
Alright, so have there been examples of this kind of like small victory happening around the world?
I think a good example would be the teachers' strike.
Like
the problem. Well, it was. Yeah, and I think that actually, like, sorry, I'm all right. Basically, the teachers' strikes were nationwide. It wasn't just Virginia. It wasn't just West Virginia. It was a nationwide, really a nationwide event, and it did secure, as much as one can in America. It was able to get promises of better working conditions. At the same time, one of the things that I've noticed is strikes like that, like educational strikes, things like that, they tend to get a lot of press in that they're happening, not necessarily in their successes or what the people who are striking are actually going through at that time. And I think that can kind of be mirrored in Australia, based on what y'all have said.
So does it depend
about their?
Does it depend on the type of action being taken? Because we've got like a regular sort of stop work strike happening with the teachers' strike, but we also have a blockading deliveries in the Chemist warehouse example?
See, the diversity in tactics, I think, is one of the things that's really kind of kept under. When people think strike, what do you think? Let's just do a quick
Withholding of
thought
labor.
experiment.
Yeah.
Withholding of labor. Okay, let's think about like actual like physical actions. So like yes. Okay, so that was my girlfriend in the background. Thank you, Aislinn. Yeah, it's standing outside with a picket line, chanting. Yes, picket signs and chanting, and it doesn't really. At no point does it really take into account the actual behind the scenes negotiations, the multiple contacts that need to be maintained. It's very reductive. I feel as though in the general populace's mind, as far as what actually goes into a strike. I was actually looking into what it would take to start a strike in the United States, and apparently there's a lot of conditions that need to be met before something can legally be considered a strike.
Yeah.
Which is funny, considering that it's constitutionally protected. Collective bargaining is a constitutionally protected right that is invoked a grand total of almost never.
What are the conditions?
What is it?
Yeah, what are the conditions that have to be met for it to be?
It depends. Let me get back to you on that. I'll pull it up.
Badman. I'm sorry, I've forgotten where you're from, but where you are, do you have any examples of like successful union action that just isn't covered?
So I've got an example of ongoing union action, not in the UK, but in Ireland where I'm from, that is kind of getting covered because it has popular support as well.
Mm-hmm.
So the Irish Nurses and Midwives organisation are on and off strike at the moment, like general strike. They were hitting it in February. The usual, bad pay and really bad conditions. Obviously, nurses tend to go on strike a lot on behalf of patients in a weird way. Like, they care about staff and that kind of thing. I don't know, but it's been an ongoing kind of dragging on kind of situation for them. But in a weird way, it seems to be winning popular support. I don't really know what they're doing specifically this time to do that. Like, maybe it's a lot to do with the material conditions in Ireland at the moment or whatever. But yeah, they've managed to get some media attention, and people like nurses, I guess, as well, isn't it? It's like a popular frontline job, isn't it?
Go ahead, Dip Dap.
Since I live in Alabama, I can tell you one thing. I have never seen a strike in my life. Ever.
On technicality, or you've never seen people standing out front of their workplace with placards?
Never in person. Never seen a strike in person. Never heard of a strike happening in Alabama in my lifetime.
Really?
They've happened, but don't get covered by anyone. The only I've ever figured out there actually was a fucking workers' movement in this state was by reading a book about it.
Well,
I had to read The Hammer and Hoe by Dr. Robin Kelly, and that's the only thing I've ever gotten about it.
So does that mean there's a lack of, let's say, education on striking, how to strike, and the effects of it? And are we able to use the examples we've listed to help other comrades understand more?
Yeah, the only strike I've ever heard of in Alabama that was before then was back when my grandfather was alive. And by that, I mean my dad told me about a strike in fucking, 70s.
Okay, here's the thing. What was really heartening for me to hear as a radical socialist was my union organizer who said, okay, there's a million different conditions which have to be met for it to be a legal strike. You have to do this, you have to do that. You have to organize, you have to call a vote, you have to submit a petition to the workplace, you need to register a strike with, the Fair Work Commission, you got to do all this stuff, basically, right? And basically, this is a protected action. This is protected by law. This action is protected by law, right? So, what he said next gave a warm, fuzzy feeling, and it was just like, the simple fact is the law is in place to protect capital, and therefore, not every action we take can be protected. Sometimes we must move on the edge of the law or even outside it to achieve our objectives. And I'm like, oh, he said it! He said the thing! He said the thing! Basically, sometimes to achieve proper resolutions in workplace disputes, we need to break the law. And I'm like, oh. Revolutionary activity, my friend. I see you are a man of culture as well.
I'm looking at an Alabama law right now. I figured out why I've never seen this shit.
Oh,
why? Public employees or their representatives may make proposals as to wages and working conditions. Public officials are under a duty to receive such proposals in good faith. However, public officials cannot be compelled to negotiate toward a labor contract, and public employees are not authorized to picket to compel a labor contract. Nichols v. Bolding, 228 SO 2D 868, and that's from 1973 in this.
So it's
Jesus
essentially
Christ.
illegal for public sector workers to strike in Alabama, is it?
We also have right to work laws, which means that forbids an employee it is unlawful to force a worker as a condition of employment to authorize a payroll deduction. Basically, you don't have to join a union in the state. Some states have it, some don't. And you also, I believe you're not allowed to be compelled to join a union by other workers, in my knowledge.
If we're going to try and, in my workplace, my campaign is very simple. If at some point we are able to get the ability to negotiate for a new business agreement,
Mm-hmm.
The first thing we're going to shoot for is securing induction rights.
Mm.
If nothing else, we will only accept a small pay rise, but if nothing else, we will get induction rights. Because induction rights means that we can go into the training groups or the new employees and recruit directly while the new recruits are in the training room.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, the first thing that you do is you recruit them as they walk in the door. Basically,
would you guys consider, say, any union anywhere striking to be a revolutionary act, or is it better to have a mass line, to have a larger union take a larger general strike, or is it is any small victory a victory when the cleaners union of mum and pop store go on strike to get a 1% pay rise?
I mean, that's just not going to happen. It's simply not. Quite frankly, the example is, it's kind of a loaded one, and I can understand why you put it forth, but quite frankly, small business workers, they aren't going to go on strike. They're either just going to walk out, or they're going to suck it up and deal with the conditions they've got. They don't have enough power to unionize, or, for that matter, really do much of anything. I mean, quite frankly, small businesses can be some of the most exploitative businesses out there, and they will actively prey on people simply because they're like, oh, well, don't you want to support your local small business and support your local economy? Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
There's another thing that they do, and it's I think Zizek calls it the illusion of the boss as a friend.
Exactly.
They become people, and by that I mean they try to transcend the classical idea of boss. And that is what mom and pop stores are. They try and transcend that feeling of your boss versus a friend. They go out and have drinks with you on a Friday night, so you're compelled not to, do anything.
So if you're trying to
Um,
convince your friends to unionize, which friends should you get to unionize, essentially? Or who should we get to unionize first? If the small businesses, mom and pop, people aren't interested or it's not
Industries.
going to work, then who do we get to sign up?
Industry workers.
Well, industry workers is great because that disrupts the supply chain, but
Mhm.
you kind of have to remember that in quote unquote Western country, industry is very limited.
Oh yeah, it's very
in-
limited. Exactly.
it-
They've outsourced it to where it's less of a problem for them.
yeah, so I don't know. Quite frankly, any level of the supply chain is a good place to try and unionize people, be it manufacturing and industry, be it retail workers. Now, I'd probably get a lot of flack from fellow leftists about this, but retail workers make up the vast majority of the workforce, at least in the United States. I believe it's Walmart
In Britain as
Mhm.
well.
employs the most amount of people in the United States, hands down. And someone can look up that figure for me, but I'm pretty sure they are the number one employer, save for maybe Amazon.
Yeah, I was gonna say countries that sell things companies that sell things online,
Mm.
like
The simple
major
fact
shipping
is,
companies. Major shipping companies.
Yeah, KT Trip. Also, Kate. How do you pronounce that? I'm sorry. I'm really. He
it?
brought up a good
QT
point.
trap.
Okay, cutie trap. They brought up a point where the service industry in post-industrial nations tends to be bloated, which is very true. However, it is extremely difficult. Say every retail worker in the United States just suddenly decided screw it and they walked out of work. Now, granted, the actual reality of that happening is a bit of a different story. But should it happen, that would actually fall into what is considered illegal in the United States, where a strike action qualifies as something that could result in a state of national emergency.
Mm.
Now, if every grocery store worker suddenly decided to get up and walk out one day because they weren't getting paid enough, suddenly you've got a situation on your hands where, quite frankly, there would be anarchy on the streets, not in the leftist anarchy, but in the sense that
Chaos.
just chaos. There would be chaos because people wouldn't be
more
able to
blood
get
for the blood god.
exactly. No, seriously, people wouldn't be able to get their groceries. They wouldn't be able to get gas pumped. They wouldn't be able to get new cell phones. I mean, you name it. You name it.
Yeah.
The service industry, despite how bloated it is, wields a lot of power and has the ability to cause a pretty major stoppage in the economy should so much as even one store
Mm.
decide to go on strike.
Well,
And what's up?
Well, I mean, I was just going to ask, if those are the kinds of people that we should be, retail workers union or something, if those are the kinds of people we should get on board and, joining our side, if you will, are we able to use the little examples of, Chemist Warehouse and in America and the nurses, as examples for them to inspire them to join and then to copycat in the retail industry.
Can I hit up with a counterpoint there? Maybe?
It's
Oh yeah, Badman, go ahead.
So, like, I don't know.
Also, Badman, you're
obviously-
very, very quiet.
Am I still super quiet? I tried my very best to crank up the game, but can you hear me now?
A little better.
Yes.
A little better.
Go ahead.
All right. So obviously, like, key sectors of the economy are the best place to unionize, and those strikes are the most effective in a political sense because they do the most damage to the economy. But like, any worker that's willing to unionize is probably a good thing, because as long as you can damage the profits of your employer, you can mount an effective strike. You don't have to try and take down the economy every time. The goal is to just make sure that your position as a worker is bolstered by the fact that you can enforce your power. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
That's definitely true. I agree with that. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but
No.
something that is worth. If there isn't the threat that the entire economy can be damaged by a large-scale strike, then they're not going to back down. I'm sorry. Like, I find it really, really difficult to think that, a handful of guys working at Walmart suddenly threatening to strike nationwide would cause some sort of crisis. It's the threat of crisis that employers would be looking to mitigate, as opposed to not necessarily creating a crisis, but I guess my point is the threat of creating a crisis is really what they're afraid of, not necessarily creating a crisis. And just so we're clear on that, at the same time, you need to have the manpower to potentially create a crisis if need be, because at the end of the day, the folks that are, quite frankly, at the oligarchs and the petty bourgeoisie, they are not going to capitulate because some folks decided to walk out of work and it happened to be 3 guys at a store across the country. No, they would pay attention considerably more to a large scale threat. And I think that's one of the reasons that people, specifically in the US, are a bit hesitant to unionize beyond the cultural implications, but simply in that. What's up?
So if a union action is centered around like a smaller, say, warehouse or a string of warehouses in just one business, and the union action is only going to affect that, is it better to wait until you can create a larger threat, or should they focus smaller on that to fix those conditions and then move on to the next problem down the chain or in a different place of business?
I would argue there's a very fine line you have to walk with both, simply because in the United States, mass strikes like that are actually illegal. Let me actually look at the things that can make a strike illegal. Intermittent strikes, slow down strikes. So like the distribution thing that they were doing at the warehouse. I'm sorry, I don't remember the names. Again, I'm very sick right now. But so yeah, slow down strikes in which employees fail to perform the duties in which the employer has historically required them to perform. In facility or sit down strikes, again, illegal. Organization picketing, where the employer has lawfully recognized another union. So if another union that is, I guess, less, what would the word be, potent, were to be formed, and the employer were to recognize that union, it could be shut down pretty quickly. Another thing that is illegal is quote unquote mass picketing, which, again, relating to the service industry, is so unhelpfully vague. I mean, at this point, you get I mean, some of these retail establishments have hundreds of people working for them, if not thousands. And if you were to get every single employee at one of those institutions, or I guess businesses, not institutions, to strike, lawyers could easily make a case in American courts, civil courts, against the union or picketing workers, in that they're conducting a mass picketing, which is technically illegal, and that could actually end up with everyone in jail. So
so are solidarity strikes. Well,
yes, exactly.
Yeah, you can't, like, in Australia, solidarity strikes are illegal. That I do know. You can't go on a strike. You can't go on strike if say a neighboring business goes on strike and you come out in support of them. You can't go on. You are technically taking an illegal action.
But can you still boycott?
Excuse me.
Like with the Chemist Warehouse thing? Lots of people boycotted
Oh, yeah.
Chemist Warehouse.
Oh yeah.
I believe we can do that, but like, I think a lot of people don't realize that like, even the things that like America touts as like really, really like progressive, like the boycotts in the '60s, those were illegal.
Illegal boycotts. I'm just imagining police officers pointing guns at people at the register, like buy it, damn
Don't
you.
forget the police. What about the National Frickin' Guard?
Oh, yeah.
No, I mean more like the fucking sit-ins and things and the marches. Those were illegal, to my knowledge.
Oh, okay.
And seeing as I'm in Alabama, that's very pertinent to what we're taught here. These were like really valiant acts. Yeah, they were valiant because it was fucking illegal. And I think it might still be illegal.
So,
well, I know that in Adelaide we had an action. Unfortunately, I couldn't make it, but we had an action at Chemist Warehouse while the strike was underway, where our South Australian branches occupied several outlets.
So
what do you mean by occupy?
Yeah, we all sat down in the all of my comrades sat down in the aisles of the store and prevented people from walking around.
Classic sit-in. So obviously these kinds of actions, right? Some of them illegal, some of them disruptive. They're obviously going to get some form of reprisal, either legal action or the store owner, dumping fertilizer next to people. Is there a way to like turn that to our advantage? Like, taking the Chemist Warehouse example, people's tires were slashed, people had manure dumped next to them, but they got those incidents out to sort of bad publicity for the Chemist Warehouse owners. Is that a tactic that we should be employing? So, like, even though there's reprisals against the action, is it possible to use that to your advantage?
Yes, like the thing that you need to focus on. I'm sorry, but like I want to get this out for a second. So the thing that you need to focus out, especially about strikes, is the fact that strikes hurt not only the business owners but also the community. And when you talk about, again, the punishments of the strikers, it not only hurts, the members who are striking, but also by extension the larger community, because, well, you're striking and you kind of disrupt the local economy. And I think that if you want to, strategize around the bad behaviors in punishment by the business owners, I think that you should put like a limit over, the damages that, basically like a threshold over the damages that the business owners can make before, you basically, the strike is hurting yourself more than hurting, the business owners, I think.
Well, that's interesting. it's interesting actually, because in our experience with Chemist Warehouse, one of the funniest bits of feedback we got is that people were calling in regarding products they're waiting for, and they're like, oh, you know, we're waiting on this and this because of an industrial action, like our workers have gone on strike, and so there's strikes going on, so we can't. And apparently we've got some feedback that the response of a good percentage of the customers, I mean, this is probably just because it's Australia, a response of the customers was, pay your fucking workers then.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna say something right now. I'm gonna say something here is
Go ahead.
fuck them, fuck the workers. Fuck the idea that you
Looks
should
like Banhammer.
you should give up. No. Make no concession is my general mindset. Like, compromise should not be made in my mindset. Like, short term, sure, but like make sure that you remember long term. I'm gonna say something. Your goal is not to compromise; it's to beat it.
That's really
Fuck
hard to
the
maintain,
idea that like you should give in eventually or anything like that. Like, be reasonable, demand everything.
I mean, the material reality of that, though, is that people need stuff to survive.
Yeah, that's
and
why
unfortunately,
here in Alabama, when we did that in the 30s, we had community people that basically provided for them when they were striking.
Yeah, I
Which
guess not
is-
everyone always
which
has
is-
that luxury either, isn't it? Like,
We
have
need,
Yeah.
we need to get. But what I'm saying is, we need to get back to doing that.
What did you say,
any of you
Banhammer?
all
Oh.
seen strike? Not everyone has that luxury. Have any of you all seen strikes that have not really worked out, where the workers just lose? Like, that's when you see
It
how that
happens all the
happens, like,
Yeah,
it
all the
happens
time.
most of the time. But like that's kind of part of the
Like-
problem. So, it's nice and lofty to say, well, you should keep continuing to strike until we have fucking full communism. Like, you know what I mean? It's like I agree in principle with that idea to some degree. But
Oh, I mean, long term though.
yeah, of course. Like the whole point is to build a fucking like really strong labor movement across every single sector of the economy, so that we can destroy this horrible system or whatever. But for a worker engaging in a strike over conditions, like that's the first rung on the ladder, really, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's an opportunity to radicalize and to build unions even further. All of that. But I guess you can't. Like you got to start where you were, isn't it? It's kind of
Yeah.
the issue.
to
I mean,
kind of, sorry, to kind of segue back into TK's original question, on how we can capitalize on reprisals and things like that,
Mm-hmm.
and how we can use, I guess, quite frankly, publicize victories and losses alike. Crap, I forgot where I was going with this. Oh, yeah. So I think one thing that needs to be done is not just promoting things on social media, and not just not going through the motions, but I think there does need to be quite frankly constant contact with the press, and as I guess wishful thinking as it is, I think some of the biggest failures that we can see can in part be attributed to failures of the workers in question to really make their case to the public, to the general public as a whole. Not the companies hate when their bottom line is hurt simply from issues in distribution, but what they hate even more is when their name is associated with really crappy things. To use, I guess, a good example, no pun intended, but the manure at what is it, Chemist's warehouse?
Chemist Warehouse, yeah.
Yeah. So kind of a crappy situation. But at the same time, how many people do you think actually knew about that beyond social media, beyond the people that were actually there? How many members of the general public were aware that Chemist's warehouse literally had dump trucks full of dung dropped off in front of the workers who were striking because they were not getting paid enough? How many people actually know that? How many people do you think are aware of that and would be furious to hear that? I mean, not just within the sphere of those who are directly affected of it, but the general public.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even soc dems and liberals. I mean, they would be furious to know that, and there would be a, quite frankly, they would boycott
Mm.
if they knew.
So would you say, if we are to get, a mass movement, we shouldn't just be talking to the workers, but also the customers?
The customers and the press, quite frankly. And one of the best ways to reach the customers is through the press, which is unfortunate because the press, especially in Australia and the United States, is very tightly controlled by concentrated wealth and by, quite frankly, oligarchs and petty bourgeoisie. One good example was the strikes.
Hmm?
Yeah, like we
Sorry,
don't really report on them here.
Well, sorry, I didn't quite get to finish my thought. My Aislinn, my girlfriend, brought up a good point that liberals have a tendency to be a bit wishy-washy when it comes to stuff like that and how they wouldn't necessarily boycott.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like she just said.
Tell her to get a mic and a headset and come on.
Yeah. Oh, yes. She can come on.
So yeah, so basically, she brought up the point that liberals don't really care if they like the product enough. So like, if there was a lemonade chain, or what was the company? Was it Nestle? Which company were you referring to? Oh yeah, Chick-fil-A.
Oh.
So liberals constantly, well, yeah, the general public, but liberals in general have a hard on for Chick-fil-A. I mean, not for nothing. They've got good chicken. What can I say? They also hate gay people.
Mm-hmm.
They really, really hate gay people. And I have to say, I've never eaten at Chick-fil-A. I said they had good chicken because I was under the impression that that's why people ate there. Maybe they just hate gay people too. I don't know. Point is, millions of people go to Chick-fil-A. A lot of people know that they hate gay people. Of those who do know they hate gay people, what percentage of them care?
Or care enough to not eat there.
Yeah. So would you other guys think that we've got pretty good tactics, we've got good recruitment techniques and whatnot. It's more about getting these little victories and the things that unions can do for people out there. Like, if we want to advertise, how do we circumvent the regular press?
Well, that's an unpopular. Oh, go on. Sorry.
Go ahead, Badman.
I think. Oh, sorry, Badman.
Even though it's kind of the opposite of what we were saying earlier, like, I guess because of the way that mainstream media is kind of controlled and owned by the same class of people that you're fighting against when you go on strike, we sometimes have to use social media and like outsider media in that kind of way. On top of that as well, like there's the importance of like a role of party politics is kind of important there. So if you've got your local left-wing organizations backing up your strikes, like they'll do some of your promotion work for you, isn't it? Because that's kind of their job. Like, so they'll get out there and they'll fucking print the leaflets for you and let everyone know that you're on strike. They might go to their town centres and run stalls, letting people know what you're doing and why you're on strike. And if your employer is using disgusting tactics to try and bully you out, like, hopefully they've printed that shit up on leaflets and are talking to people in your community. It's like like the ideal situation is that you have like radical left wing like groups in your community that give a shit about your strike, and that the community respects that group enough to read their leaflets when they go out leafleting and stuff, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And beyond local parties, but also go for the jugular, go for the people, your representatives. Not for nothing, I don't want to say I'm no reformist by any means, but at the same time, if you can convince your local representatives, be it anywhere from Congress or Parliament or whatever it may be, whatever you may have, if you can convince so much as a handful of them, public officials, that enough of their constituents will be furious enough with the current situation to look elsewhere the next election cycle, that has them shaking in their seats. Regardless of how rigged or how stacked against, I guess, the people elections are, and elected officials know to some extent their power is derived from their constituents. And if their constituents aren't willing to be their constituents any longer, then they have a problem on their hands. So I think the general takeaway from this should be, when striking, the target, I guess, the target is the business, and while the end goal and the primary tactic is the strike, and the strike is a means to an end of better working conditions, or so on and so forth. You get the idea. There needs to be far more diversity in tactics, and despite the fact that people's resources are limited, I do feel as though those limited resources can be put to greater use, and that going beyond the picket line is far more effective in the long run.
What do you mean by
picket
that?
lines
Going
are
beyond
great.
the picket line?
So again, contacting local representatives,
Okay.
maintaining a constant pipeline with any contacts in the press that you can get a hand on. I mean, maintaining contact with the community, reaching out to the community, even doing public volunteer work for the community, and making it clear that you are productive members of your community that are being poorly treated by an institution that has a lot more financial power available to them than the individual. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So leveraging not just the picket line, not just the base tactic, but having total diversity in tactics, and that needs to be crucial in order for these things to be wholly effective. Sorry, I'll get off my soapbox now.
It's good. Very concise.
There's some other current events about labor stuff in another country that I've been recently because I speak the language. So
China.
Yeah, China. Hey, Dengists, I'm coming for your fucking throat.
Boy.
So, right now in Beijing, the 3 labor organizers have been arrested, and as of the 25th, we don't even know where they are. And as of the 27th, we don't know where Zheng Churan is at all. And he's been arrested and detained somewhere, but we don't know. And a lot of times, especially in this region of China, they will arrest them, and then book them under fake names so we don't even know where they are.
This is in southern China, right?
This is
Like,
in Beijing and Guangdong.
Oh, really? Okay, northern China. All right.
Is there a big
so
difference between north and south?
Yes.
It's happening. Well, this is also in Beijing, and then also this is in southern, and then Guangdong. But
Okay.
I highly recommend anyone who wants to read more about this read the Chuang Journal. They're really good. But Yang Zhongjun has been arrested. I believe the editor-in-chief of news outlet New Generation was detained in January. Wei Zhili and Ke Changbing of the editors of that publication were taken away last week from the Financial Times, but they're getting it from other sources. They're getting the wife of one of these people. Her WeChat, which is like the main social media that people use in China, has been blocked.
Oh.
Like additional 5 that were protesting were detained in January. I believe that. Okay, quote from his wife is, "My husband just wants to help workers. He hasn't done anything wrong, but he still has been detained and lost his freedom. It's devastating." Right now, like it's just really fucking up right now in China. Like Guangzhou, Guangdong, they're like really fucking awful places. The Chinese work conditions are fucking terrible. I mean, they're suicide nets for a reason.
What you fail to understand, DipDap, is that all of these
God.
people have been arrested.
What I fail to understand is that you should definitely read Xi Jinping's On the Governance of China. And
well, all of
that you see, socialism with Chinese characteristics is absolutely not just renamed of the Singaporean economic model called capitalism with Asian values. Absolutely fucking not.
And these so-called trade unionists are actually CIA agents who have been planted to destabilize the country. You just don't understand it.
Oh my
Comrade
God.
G is taking a decisive stand against Western imperialism, and all you can do is retweet and parrot their propaganda. How dare you?
You see, they're just developing Africa for socialism in 2050.
Exactly.
Jesus.
This is what you need to understand. Long live Comrade G's economic model.
I should have my own fucking soapbox where I just scream about China for hours on this show, honestly. Because I could fucking do it.
It's like Bolshevik Bistro.
Where I just scream about China being terrible for like an hour.
I think one thing that needs to be taken into consideration, at least when discussing China, and I'm not about to start defending or criticizing China as a model of socialism or a state or whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
China's an extremely large country with almost 2 billion people in it.
Mm-hmm.
Dangus, get out, Ree.
So, what's worth mentioning is that when these kinds of things happen in China, you can't necessarily
say it's all China.
You can't condemn the state as a whole when these kinds of things happen, because the bureaucracy there puts that of every Western nation to shame, and not because of their economic model, not because of their government model, but simply because of the sheer size.
Oh yeah, Guangzhou, the city, has a population density 1,000 people per square mile.
Jesus.
Precisely. If there was one place, in this planet, maybe two places. Let's say that for the sake of argument. There were two places on this planet you wanted to just disappear in.
China.
There are two countries China and India.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus.
Simply because
Well-
they are so populous, so spread out, so diverse, and just so immensely bureaucratic. Again, this is regardless of whatever system they'll have in place. China's bureaucracy is here to stay, and
Yes.
people disappearing, concentrated wealth rearing its ugly head. No matter what happens, it's always going to be an issue in China.
Mhm.
No matter what economic system they're
yeah,
under,
for sure.
the sheer size of that nation is enough to put us all to shame, really. I mean, quite frankly, it is a huge country. So the act of a handful of officials really can't speak for the state, and because of this, because the nation is so big, they need a massive state to supplement that, and as such, there is immense opportunity and room for abuse within that state structure.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Basically, balkanized China. No, I'm joking. Just
Fuck.
leave me alone.
Actually,
I'm
Chuang would
joking.
agree with you. Chuang would agree with you actually on that.
I mean, I wouldn't. I honestly, that's not even what I want. There's no easy solution. I think that China's in immense need of governmental reforms, simply for the ability to, I guess, divide power and responsibility in a more ethical manner and leave some room for, despite that leaving some room for dissent, leaves a lot less room for abuse within the state bureaucracy, which is something we've seen time and time again in almost all nations, regardless of whether or not they're socialist or capitalist or whatever they want to call themselves. The larger the bureaucracy, the larger of a government needed to maintain a
Adequate hold, I guess.
yeah, there's more room for abuse of the populace, and I don't want to go full anarchist, but at the same time, like, you have to keep in mind when discussing China it is a huge country,
yeah, for sure.
and pretty much anybody can make anybody else disappear if they so desired.
But TK, Batman, to illustrate to you like the size of Beijing, right? The city. The population is like just under the population of your country.
Yeah, it's pretty dense.
The entire metropolitan area of Guangzhou is 44 million people.
Okay, that's more than Australia's population.
Guangzhou is a city.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have to,
Beijing is 22.5 million.
I think we've gone a bit off the rails. We've gone from a local, Chemist warehouse action to dismantling China. So I think that might
dismantle China. Neo China arrived from the future.
Dismantle China. So yeah, I think maybe that's a good time to wrap up. Does anyone have any social media announcements to plug, or any last words before we wrap up?
All hail the People's Republic of Manchuria.
I for one would like to welcome our Dengist overlords. As I prepare for their inevitable arrival.
Sorry, Badman, what were you saying?
I've got a Spicy Takes coming out next week.
Ooh, Spicy Takes.
It's going to be on Yang Gang. So, yeah.
Yang.
And
where can we view this Spicy Take?
Oh, zero books, as usual.
Zero books on YouTube. Okay. Sweet. I'll have to check it out myself.
Deng Xiaoping, Li Yun, Han Gen.
Alrighty.
Oh, God.
I just think Dengism is stupid.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna throw this out here. I am thinking and debating starting my own podcast, which is I'm looking for names. But Weeb Revolution springs to mind.
Oh, Jesus. Do you have a Twitter we
But-
could send you suggestions for the name on?
At Posadas Pac-Man on Twitter, of course. I'm here. There is new videos coming out on. There is a new video in the works on my channel as we speak. Also, long-form projects. See, this is the thing. I've got work tomorrow, and my mind is like automatically like, long-form projects are currently on hold, as my artist is still working on the artwork for it. So, stay tuned for that. Yeah.
There's an extension of my last Bolshevik Bistro in the works.
Excellent.
When am I going to come on Bolshevik Bistro?
Soonish. I suppose. We're going to have to do a 2-hour Bolshevik Bistro on Dip Dap screaming about China first, I think. Alrighty, well, I think that's a good
I think
point.
we're good.
Yeah, good point to wrap up. So I want to thank everybody for coming on, especially Badman Massive, Dip Dap, Positive Pac-Man, Cutie Trap, and Space Letten 3 Western Jubilee. I want to thank everybody in the chat for chatting with us, and for everybody for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe to get everything Eastern Marshlands, and we will catch you next time.
Deport Congress to Tibet.